Welcome to the Online Digital Marketing Podcast. We'll be discussing marketing strategies, trends, and tips that will help your business succeed in the digital age. Every episode, we'll be interviewing industry professionals and providing valuable insights on how to leverage digital tools for maximum engagement and ROI. Don't forget to subscribe so you can stay up to date on the latest trends in online marketing.
You know, when you set out to build a physical structure, like, say, a house, there is an objective reality to it.
Right, totally.
You pour a solid concrete foundation, you frame the walls with heavy steel, you put on a weatherproof roof, and if the engineering is better, the house is just undeniably stronger.
Yeah, you can literally measure it.
Exactly. It's measurable. It's an objective fact. And I think by default, we assume that building a business or, launching a product or even marketing a new idea works the exact same way. Like if you engineer the objectively superior product, if you build the better house, you automatically win the neighborhood.
I mean, it feels like that should be the natural law of the universe, doesn't it?
Right.
The best product wins. It's a very comforting thought for anyone who spends all their time perfecting their craft or, their engineering.
But then you step into the actual real world of marketing and suddenly the laws of physics just stop applying.
Oh, completely. They go right out the window.
The best product frequently loses. The objectively superior engineering gets completely ignored. So today we are doing a deep dive into the 22 Immutable Laws of Marketing by Ries and Jack Trout to figure out why. We're going to bypass the noise and translate their, honestly, intensely counterintuitive strategies into actionable insights for whatever project you, the listener, are working on right now.
And, to really grasp what Ries and Trout are arguing here, we have to abandon the idea that the marketplace is a physical location.
Right, what do you mean?
Well, the battle for your project's success isn't actually happening on a retail store shelf. And it isn't happening on a search engine result page. It is happening entirely inside the mental architecture of the consumer.
Ah.
Right. Marketing is not a battle of products at all. It is a battle of perceptions.
Which perfectly defines our battlefield. If we look at the foundational argument the authors make, what they call the law of leadership and the law of the mind, they state flatly that it is better to be first than it is to be better.
Yes, that's a huge one.
Because being first in the market is completely pointless if you aren't first in the customer's mind. The historical examples they use are incredibly sticky, too. Like, everyone knows Charles Lindbergh was the first person to fly solo across the Atlantic Ocean.
Sure.
But who was the second?
Exactly. It was Burt Hinkler.
Right. And the tragic irony there is that Burt Hinkler actually flew faster.
Yeah, and he consumed less fuel, I think.
Yep. His flight was technically, objectively better engineered. But nobody knows who he is because Lindbergh already occupied the, first transatlantic pilot slot in the public's mind.
It's just wild. And I see the exact same thing with brands. Hertz was the first major car rental company. Coca-Cola was the first major cola. The actual objective quality of the second or third entry just doesn't matter nearly as much as we want to believe it does.
And the authors really drive this home with the law of perception. They argue a product can literally win a blind taste test and still lose in sales.
Oh, the New Coke example.
Yeah, famously. New Coke beat Pepsi and Classic Coke in blind tests, but when it actually went to market, it was a total disaster.
Because the perception of what Coke meant to people was just stronger than the actual flavor on their tongues.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because I really want to push back on this idea that better doesn't matter.
Go for it.
Wait, so if I spend 3 years building a technically superior product, let's say a new smartphone, right? And it has double the battery life of anything else on the market, Ries and Trout are basically saying it might just not matter at all if someone else already parked their brand in the customer's mental garage first. I really struggle to accept that an objectively better battery just gets ignored.
Well, what's fascinating here is the mechanics of cognitive load. Human beings are bombarded with, thousands of marketing messages a day.
Oh, it's an absolute avalanche.
Exactly. And to survive that avalanche of information without our brains melting down, we categorize things quickly. And once a mental category is filled, we essentially lock the door. That mental real estate is incredibly finite.
So there's no room for the new guy.
Right. If Apple or Samsung has already parked their brand in the premium smartphone spot in your mental garage. You don't just get to tow their car out just because you show up with a better battery. The mental effort required for a consumer to change their mind, to evict the current resident and install your new brand is massive.
So the specs are secondary to the psychology.
Completely. Shading that initial perception is the actual job. If the perception is that the established brand is the default, the true standard, then objective reality like battery life won't change buying behavior.
They'll just ignore it.
Yeah, the consumer will just rationalize why the existing brand is still better. They'll assume, well, there must be a catch with this new battery. It'll probably catch fire or whatever.
Wow, that completely upends how most of us approach product development. But it brings up a huge practical problem. Think about the listener right now. Maybe they're trying to launch a new software or a consulting side hustle or, I don't know, a new creative agency. If the mind is already occupied by these massive firsts, how does a newcomer ever break in?
It's tough.
Because the logical instinct is to broaden your appeal, right? Offer more features, appeal to a wider demographic, just try to outshout the giant. But the book argues that is exactly the wrong move. To grow, we actually have to shrink our focus.
Yeah, it's the ultimate paradox of positioning. When you're small or just starting out, your instinct is to catch every possible fish, so you cast the widest net imaginable.
You say yes to every client request.
Exactly. You add every feature your competitors have.
Yeah.
But in the mental battlefield, a wide net just looks invisible. It means nothing.
And the authors map out a pretty brilliant alternative path. It starts with the law of the category. Basically, if you can't be first in an existing category, you do not fight the leader. You create a new category where you can be first.
Kind of like Amelia Earhart.
Yes. She wasn't the second person to fly solo across the Atlantic. She was the first woman to do it. She created a new category.
Right.
So in business, instead of trying to be just another general marketing agency, you become the first agency specializing only in home service SEO. Or, the first agency that guarantees revenue outcomes specifically for commercial roofers.
You redefine the game so you are the only player.
Exactly.
And once you define that new category, you have to lock it down using the law of focus. You have to narrow your entire operation down until you own one single word in the prospect's mind. Like if I say overnight delivery, you immediately think of
FedEx.
Right. Or when I say safety in the context of automobiles, you think of Volvo.
Exactly.
And crucially, the book warns about the law of exclusivity. You cannot steal a word that your competitor already owns. If a competitor already owns safety, you are just lighting your marketing budget on fire trying to claim it.
Oh, yeah. Actually, trying to claim their word usually just strengthens their position.
Really? Well, every time you run an ad saying, no, actually, our cars are the safest, the consumer's brain just gets reminded of Volvo. You literally end up subsidizing the leader's mental real estate.
Wow. Okay, here's where it gets really interesting. Because the only way to actually own that single word is through the law of sacrifice. And it feels terrifying to shrink your audience in order to grow.
It's totally counterintuitive.
Right. It's like a chef deciding to throw away a massive 50-item menu and redesigning the entire restaurant to serve only one perfect dish. It feels like you are leaving money on the table. But by saying no to everything else, the yes becomes undeniably clear. Your perception sharpens.
And that very real fear you just mentioned, that fear of leaving money on the table, is exactly why so few companies do this well. And it's why the law of line extension is a trap almost every successful company falls into.
Oh, line extension.
Yeah. They get a little success owning one word. And the executives think, great, our brand is beloved. Let's put our name on everything. But fewer things equal a clearer meaning. When you extend a brand name into too many categories, you destroy the single word focus you worked so hard to build.
Like Heinz. They owned ketchup. But then they tried to launch Heinz baby food. Or when Harley-Davidson tried to sell perfume. I mean, come on.
Exactly. If that restaurant serving the one perfect dish suddenly starts offering tacos and sushi and pizza to capture more foot traffic, they don't become a better restaurant. They become a confusing one.
The perception blurs.
Yeah. In the mind of the consumer, a brand that stands for everything stands for absolutely nothing. So for you, the listener, you have to ask yourself, are you adding features or services to your current project just to appease 3 different types of customers? Because if you are, you're actively blurring your own perception.
Okay, so assuming you've done the hard work, you've sacrificed, you've carved out your highly focused category, and you've planted your flag on an unclaimed word, you still have to contend with competitors, right? because no lucrative category stays empty forever.
No, eventually you will have company.
So how do you position yourself against the big players without getting completely crushed? This brings us to a really strategic set of concepts about playing the game.
Right, because strategy depends entirely on context. And Ries and Trout use the law of the ladder to explain this. People mentally rank brands on a ladder. Your strategy depends entirely on which rung you occupy. If you're number 2, you really shouldn't act like you're number 1.
The classic example they give is Avis rental cars. Hertz was number 1, Avis was number 2. Avis didn't run ads claiming they were the biggest or the best. They ran that famous campaign. Avis is only 2 in rent-a-cars, so why go with us? We try harder.
Yeah, they acknowledge their rung on the ladder.
And over time, the law of duality dictates that every market eventually becomes a two-horse race. Coke and Pepsi, Apple and Microsoft. But if every market becomes a two-horse race, what happens to the third, fourth, and fifth players?
Well, that is where the law of division comes in. Categories don't just consolidate, they inevitably split. Like computers divided into massive mainframes, then MIDI computers, then personal computers, then laptops, and now smartphones and wearables. Each split creates a brand new ladder.
Which means you don't have to win the old ladder. You just have to spot the division happen, like the current split between traditional SaaS software and AI native software, and be waiting at the top of the new ladder when the market arrives.
Exactly.
But let's say you are fighting the leader of your current ladder. The book outlines the law of the opposite. It essentially says, do not copy the leader. If the leader owns big or fast, you lean heavily into contrast. You own small and personal, or thorough and luxury.
Right. For every successful attribute, there is an opposite effective attribute.
Okay, give me an example of that.
A great historical example is mouthwash. Listerine owned the market, and their whole perception was that it tasted medicinal and terrible, which meant it must be killing germs.
Right, it burns, so it's working.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So Scope didn't try to make a worse-tasting mouthwash to prove it killed more germs. They leaned into the opposite attribute. They launched a good-tasting mouthwash. They didn't fight Listerine on its own strength.
That makes total sense. But then Ries and Trout introduced the law of candor, and they argue that admitting a negative actually gets you a positive. By actively admitting we're more expensive or we're not the biggest, it opens the door to pitch better quality.
It does.
So what does this all mean? Because admitting a weakness goes against every instinct we have in business. It's like going into a job interview and starting with your biggest flaw. Tactical vulnerability sounds great in theory, but pitching your product's flaws to a board of directors who want to see ROI sounds like a great way to get fired. Why does this actually work?
Well, if we connect this to the bigger picture, you have to remember the mental state of the modern consumer. You and I and everyone listening are just constantly being sold to, which means our default psychological state is extreme skepticism.
We're all just waiting for the catch.
Exactly. When every single brand is screaming that they are the absolute best, the fastest, the cheapest, and the most revolutionary, the consumer's guard is fully up. But when you use the law of candor and freely admit a negative like Volkswagen did when they launched the tiny Beetle in a market of massive American muscle cars with the headline, "Think Small," you do something incredibly rare. You tell the absolute truth.
Oh, I see. You disarm them.
Precisely. Telling a truth that goes against your own self-interest instantly builds credibility. It completely disarms the consumer skepticism, their guard drops. And in that exact moment when their guard is down, your pivot to the benefit actually lands with authenticity. We are the most expensive because we use materials that will literally outlast your house. The admitted weakness makes the claimed strength believable.
That is such a fascinating psychological lever. But, mapping out the mind, understanding cognitive load, defining your single word, that is all theory.
Sure.
How does this play out over time in the messy, day-to-day real world? Because having the perfect strategy on paper means absolutely nothing if you execute it poorly.
Oh, execution is everything.
Right. And the final group of laws deals entirely with execution and long-term survival. And it starts with the tension between the short-term and the long-term, specifically the law of perspective and the law of unpredictability.
Right, because marketing effects take place over an extended period. It is a long game, and the actions that boost sales today often destroy sales tomorrow.
The perfect example the authors give is heavy discounting or constant couponing. If your sales are slumping, dropping your price by 30% will give you an immediate spike in revenue.
Oh, everyone loves a sale.
Yeah, but the law of perspective shows that over the long term, you are actively training your customers not to buy at full price. You are changing your perception from premium to cheap.
Yeah, you've permanently devalued yourself.
Exactly. And speaking of the long term, they claim rigid 5-year plans are destined to fail because you simply do not control your competitors' moves. A competitor's sudden price drop or new technology can invalidate a highly engineered 5-year plan overnight. Real-time flexibility is required.
And to win that long, unpredictable game, you really have to understand resource allocation. The law of singularity argues that breakthroughs do not come from doing 20 small things slightly better than the competition. They come from finding one bold move that exploits a competitor's vulnerability.
But, and this is a critical reality check, the law of resources states that even the most brilliant, perfectly positioned idea in the world needs sufficient funding and fuel. Without the resources to drive the idea into the market's heavily guarded mind, it will just fail.
Yep.
Like Steve Jobs had a brilliant idea with the Macintosh, but he also spent massive amounts of money on the famous 1984 Super Bowl ad to literally force that idea into the public consciousness.
It's the harsh reality of business. A great idea without a budget to execute it is just a secret.
Exactly. And let's say you do get the funding and you execute the one bold move and it works beautifully. Now you have to face the law of success and the law of failure.
Oh, success is dangerous.
It is. Because success, unfortunately, breeds arrogance. When brands win, they start believing their own infallibility. They stop listening to the market, and they expand too broadly. Think of IBM dominating mainframes and then arrogantly assuming they could just easily dominate personal computers, which left the door wide open for Microsoft and Apple.
The cure for success is to stay incredibly humble.
Right. And on the flip side, failure is expected. The rule here is to cut your losses quickly. Don't throw good money after bad trying to fix a broken perception. Treat failed campaigns as expensive tuition, not as a shameful secret to hide.
Which is exactly what Coca-Cola eventually did with New Coke. They didn't spend decades trying to force people to like it. They cut their losses, brought back classic Coke, and survived.
But out of all these execution concepts, the ones that really challenged my perspective are the law of hype and the law of acceleration. The book says that successful marketing is built on deep, long-term trends, not short-lived fads. If you try to accelerate a fad with too much push, you actually kill it faster.
Right.
But the law of hype, this completely flips my worldview. We constantly see massive, noisy launches in the business press. A company raises millions, throws massive launch parties, gets covered in every magazine, and we all assume those companies are dominating the market. But Ries and Trout argue that excessive noise actually means they're struggling.
Well, this raises an important question. What is the actual purpose of hype?
Yeah.
When a product is truly working, when it has achieved real product market fit and firmly lodged itself in the consumer's mind, it rarely needs to scream.
That's true.
You see a quiet, steady, compounding adoption driven by actual customer behavior and genuine word of mouth. Massive, noisy PR campaigns and manufactured hype are very often deployed as a band-aid.
Because the organic growth isn't there.
Exactly. The company is trying to force a perception through sheer volume because the underlying positioning is weak or the product just isn't naturally catching on. If you see a brand suddenly making an unnatural amount of noise, throwing money at influencers and press releases, it is often a defensive maneuver, not an offensive one. True leadership in a category speaks for itself.
Wow. So the noise is often a smokescreen for a struggling strategy. That fundamentally changes how I'm going to look at every press release from now on.
It really makes you skeptical.
It does. So let's bring this all together. We set out to bypass the noise and pull practical, executable insights from the 22 Immutable Laws of Marketing. And the overwhelming takeaway is that marketing isn't about having the objectively best product. The best engineering doesn't automatically win the neighborhood.
Not at all.
It is entirely about disciplined positioning. It's about understanding that the battlefield is the human mind, and you have to shape perception, often by shrinking your focus, admitting your flaws to build trust, and sacrificing the desire to be all things to all people.
Yeah, less is definitely more.
So I want to challenge you, the listener. Pick 2 or 3 of these concepts to really think about this week. I specifically suggest looking at the law of focus. What is the one single word your project owns? Look at the law of sacrifice. What features or target markets do you need to stop pursuing? Or the law of line extension. Where are you diluting your own brand by trying to do too much? Audit your own current projects against those 3 laws this week.
I think that is a perfect exercise for anyone trying to cut through the noise. And I want to leave you with a final thought to mull over. building directly on the law of unpredictability.
Okay, let's hear it.
Well, the authors argued heavily that long, rigid marketing plans are largely a waste of time because they pretend the future is knowable and they completely ignore the reality of competitor reactions. If that is true, if 5-year plans are truly useless in the face of shifting market realities, is the very concept of a traditional business plan totally outdated in the modern world?
Oh, that's interesting.
Right. Should we abandon long-term planning entirely in favor of pure real-time agility?
It really makes you wonder. I mean, if you are still trying to build a rigid, perfectly engineered house in a world where the ground is constantly shifting, maybe you are building the wrong thing entirely. Maybe instead of building a house, we need to focus entirely on moving into the neighborhood of the mind. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.
Ready to take your online business to the next level? Subscribe to our digital marketing podcast and then join our Accountability for Success Mastermind. With expert advice from industry leaders, you'll gain knowledge and insights that will help you succeed in today's digital marketing world. From social media strategies to search engine optimization, we have all the tools you need. Learn from successful entrepreneurs and take control of your online success. Join the Accountability for Success Mastermind now at bit.ly/AFSM podcast.